Me and Mara had been married exactly 1 year when we booked the Athena Dawn. And I want to say up front that we did everything right. We researched the route, read the reviews, compared prices, even called the company twice before putting down the deposit. So this wasn't carelessness. This was us trying to do something nice for ourselves after a year of working too much and seeing each other mostly at dinner. The company was called Helios Maritime Voyages. Based out of Athens, the route they advertised was something I'd never seen before. A 32-day cruise starting in Piraeus, then down through the Mediterranean, a stop in Cape Town, South Africa. Then across the Indian Ocean to a final destination, listed as Halos Island, described in the brochure as a private sovereign territory approximately 600 kilometers northwest of Perth, Australia, with a return flight from Perth back to the States included. Mara found it first. She was the one scrolling through some travel site at midnight with her laptop on her stomach. She called me into the bedroom and showed me the screen and said something like, "Look at this. 32 days on a ship. We've always talked about doing something like this." Which was true. We'd talked about it in the abstract way couples talk about things they assume they'll never actually do. The price was $44,000 for two, and I remember sitting on the edge of the bed looking at that number for a long time, because that was more than either of us made in 5 months. A ridiculous amount, but the brochure images were stunning. The ship looked enormous and white. The staterooms looked like hotel suites. The dining menu listed seared bluefin and truffle risotto. There was a spa and a pool deck and a jazz lounge. So we told ourselves the price made sense for that level of luxury, which is how you talk yourself into things. We paid the deposit in March, flew to Athens in early June, checked into a hotel near the port for one night, had dinner at a place near the Acropolis where Mara ordered too much wine and laughed too loud. And this was the happiest I'd seen her in a while. The whole city lit up behind her, the smell of the sea already coming off the water a few blocks away. Everything felt like a good decision. Boarding the Athena Dawn the next morning was when the first thing happened that I should have noticed, though I didn't register it as anything significant at the time. We got to the terminal around 9. The line to board wasn't long, maybe 40 people ahead of us, which struck me as odd for a ship that size. The Athena Dawn looked like it could hold hundreds of passengers easily. It had 8 decks visible from the dock, so 40 people in line felt thin, though I assumed most guests had already boarded or would arrive later. What I couldn't ignore was who those 40 people were. Every single one of them was old, not 65 and retired old, but 80-something pale around the mouth old, the kind of old where movement takes negotiation with the body. There were 2 men using walkers, a woman in a wheelchair being pushed by a uniformed attendant. Several couples who moved in that synchronized, careful way that long-married elderly people move when they've gotten used to managing each other's limitations. There was one man in particular I remember because he had a tube running from somewhere under his jacket to a small device clipped to his belt. Just a slim machine with a green light blinking on it. Dressed impeccably, full suit. Italian shoes that probably cost more than my car payment, which was strange on its own. Mara squeezed my arm and leaned close and said, "Are we the youngest people on this boat by 40 years?" Which she meant as a joke, but neither of us actually laughed. Our stateroom was everything the brochure promised, genuinely beautiful. Dark wood paneling, a queen bed with crisp white linen, a porthole window that framed the harbor, a marble bathroom with a soaking tub, fresh orchids on the dresser that Mara immediately went to touch, a card on the nightstand that said, "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Reeves," in embossed gold lettering, so we put our bags down and told each other we'd made the right call. The first full day at sea was good. The weather was warm without being brutal. The ship cut through the water smoothly. The dining room that evening was elegant with white tablecloths and real candles, and a string quartet playing near the back. Mara wore the blue dress she'd bought specifically for this trip. We had the seared bluefin the brochure had promised. It was as good as anything I'd eaten in my life. Dinner was the first time we really saw the other passengers up close. Seated at tables around us, talking quietly or not talking at all, eating with the careful pace of people who've been told to chew slowly Every face I turned toward was old in the same extreme way. Every face carried that particular tiredness that isn't tiredness from the day, but from something ongoing, something systemic. I noticed hearing aids. I noticed fingers that didn't close quite right around wine glasses. I noticed a woman at the nearest table whose neck had a discoloration on it, a wide, pale patch that spread from her jawline down below her collar like something had burned or bleached the skin there. The man at that table, presumably her husband, caught me looking, not at his wife specifically, but in the direction of their table. He was thin in a way that made his suit look borrowed, his cheekbones too prominent, his hands too large for his wrists. He gave me a smile I'd describe as knowing, like he was in on something I wasn't, then went back to his food without a word. After dinner we walked the deck. The night was warm, the Mediterranean black and mirror flat on both sides. The stars incredibly dense the way they only get when you're away from cities. Mara leaned against the railing and said the thing she'd been turning over since we boarded, which was that she thought maybe this was a medical trip for some of these people, a luxury health retreat at sea, which made a certain kind of sense. It explained the age. It maybe explained some of the physical symptoms we'd been clocking. It satisfied both of us enough to put the subject down for the night. The second day we tried to make conversation. There was a couple who ate breakfast near us every morning. Mara gave them names in her head. She called them the Hoffmans, though we never learned their real names. The man was maybe 80, silver-haired, moved with the residual confidence of someone who'd been physically powerful earlier in life. His wife was smaller and had hearing aids in both ears. She smiled often without it meaning much. Mara asked them that second morning where they were from. The man said Connecticut, Old Greenwich, which told you a lot right there. He asked where we were from, and Mara said Portland, Oregon. He nodded like that was a satisfactory answer. Then asked what we did. Mara said physical therapist and I said commercial real estate. The man smiled and said that was wonderful in a tone that had nothing behind it, like our jobs were charming hobbies we'd been indulging. Then Mara, because she can't let things alone, asked what brought them on the trip. The man's wife looked at her husband. The husband looked back at Mara with that same knowing expression the dinner man had given me the night before, then said, "We've waited a long time for this voyage," said it in a way that was meant to end the conversation rather than continue it, so we let it drop. That afternoon Mara went to the spa. I walked the ship alone for the first time. Moving through the interior deck corridors, past closed stateroom doors, through the card room where 3 elderly men were playing something with a deck I didn't recognize. The cards were larger than standard playing cards, appeared to have no numbers on them, just images. I only got a brief look before the door swung closed, through the lounge where a woman sat alone, with wireless earbuds in, eyes shut, hands folded in her lap, through the library, which was well stocked and smelled of real books, where I stopped to browse. There was a man in the library already, sitting with a thick leather-bound journal open in his lap, writing with a fountain pen. He looked up when I came in, nodded, and went back to writing. He was maybe 75, still healthy in the baseline sense, but his writing from where I was standing was dense and small, and covered the entire page without margins, like someone who'd been writing the same thing for a very long time and needed every inch. I picked a paperback thriller I'd never heard of, sat in a chair by the porthole, tried to read, but immediately found I couldn't concentrate because the man across from me kept writing, kept turning pages, the scratch of the pen continuous and even. No pauses to think, like someone transcribing from memory rather than composing. After 20 minutes, I put the book back and left. And as I walked out, I glanced back. The man had stopped writing, was watching me leave, pen held loosely in one hand, watching me with an expression I couldn't understand. I didn't mention any of this to Mara. We passed through the Suez Canal on day 4, Egypt on both banks. The scale of it surprising me even though I'd known it would be impressive. There were other ships in the queue ahead and behind us, massive tankers and container ships, and the Athena Dawn suddenly felt small by comparison, which it was, which I'd been wrong about earlier. It wasn't a large ship, mid-sized at best, maybe 200 staterooms total. which meant the passenger count was genuinely low. I asked one of the crew about it, a Filipino deck officer named Berto, who I'd chatted with near the stern, asked him how many guests were aboard. He paused before answering, not suspiciously, but in the way someone pauses when they're checking if the answer is something they're allowed to share, then told me 83 passengers. I asked if they usually sailed with more, and he said Helios didn't advertise widely. That Halo's route passengers were mostly referred, word of mouth, returning customers, which I thought was unusual but not alarming. Plenty of niche luxury companies operate that way. The Red Sea was rougher than the Mediterranean. The ship rolled enough to make sleeping difficult. Mara got mild seasickness and spent most of day 5 in the stateroom with ginger tea and a patch behind her ear. So I was alone for dinner again, seated at a small table near the window, when a man came and asked if he could join me. His name was Aldrich. He told me himself before even sitting down. He had the look of old European money. Good coat, good posture, age somewhere in his late 70s. One hand that trembled slightly when he poured water. More alert than most passengers I'd spoken with. More interested in actually talking. He asked genuine questions about my work in Portland and how Mara and I had met. He was good company like old people sometimes are when they've run out of reasons to be guarded. Toward the end of the meal, I asked him directly whether most passengers were there for health reasons, because Mara and I had been wondering. And Aldrich looked at me for a moment with something in his expression that was close to pity. Then said, something like that. Then signaled the waiter for the check. Before he left, he put his hand on my arm briefly, a contact so brief it could have been accidental, and said, "You should enjoy the journey. There's a great deal to see," which on the surface was just a polite exit line, but landed on me wrong. Landed with a weight it shouldn't have carried. We docked in Cape Town on day 12. Table Mountain visible from the harbor in that famous way. The city spread beneath it in the morning light. And Cape Town was beautiful. The kind of place that makes you understand why people move their whole lives there. The light different from anywhere I'd been, warmer and more direct. The waterfront busy with real life. Fish markets and buskers and people moving fast with the energy of a city that takes itself seriously. We had 8 hours ashore. Mara had recovered from the seasickness. We took a car to Camps Bay, ate lunch at a place on the beachfront. Walked along the water. Mara bought earrings from a woman at a stall near the promenade. We were normal tourists for 8 hours. On the walk back to the harbor, passing through the V&A waterfront, I saw 3 of the Athena Dawn's passengers outside a pharmacy near the entrance. 2 of them were the cardroom men. The third was the woman with the discolored neck. They were at the counter with a pharmacist who was handing them a large paper bag, one of those big white bags with multiple boxes inside it, the kind you only get when someone's buying something serious, something chronic. The cardroom man nearest the door saw me looking, made eye contact, turned away, and said something quiet to the others. Mara hadn't seen it. She was ahead of me looking at her phone. So I let it go. That evening the ship left Cape Town harbor as the sun went down behind the mountain, the city lights coming on all at once in the dusk. And somewhere between the harbor and the open ocean, the mood of the Athena Dawn shifted. Subtly but perceptively. The common areas quieter than usual. The dining room conversation more muted. Even Berto on the stern deck was more subdued when I passed him, like a tension in the ship's structure itself had tightened a half-turn. Mara noticed it too. She said something while we were getting ready for bed about how the ship felt different now, which I told her was just the open ocean. The atmosphere shifts when there's nothing around but water in every direction. She accepted that. On day 18 I searched for Halo's Island deaths because I'd run out of less alarming searches, because that's where my mind had settled, and I got nothing. 0 results, which is itself an answer of a kind, because everything leaves a trace now. Everything gets written about. Everything generates data, except the things that someone has worked to make invisible. The Wi-Fi on the Athena Dawn had been patchy since Cape Town, dropping for an hour here and there, then coming back, the way ship internet usually behaves in the middle of nowhere. So I didn't think much of it when it went out on day 21. I assumed it would restore itself in a few hours the way it had been doing. But it didn't. By the next morning, the satellite signal was gone. The ship's internal network still worked for the onboard entertainment system and basic messages to staff, but external connections were severed. Even the roaming signal on my phone that had been showing 1 or 2 bars in the middle of the Indian Ocean just went to nothing. Not even the emergency signal that phones usually maintain. Just a blank space where the carrier name should have been. Mara called the front desk and was told very politely that the signal disruption was expected in this region, a natural electromagnetic characteristic of the waters near Halos Island, and that connectivity would restore after arrival and departure. Expected in this region, Mara repeated, setting the phone down, and we both sat with that for a minute. She asked what I thought it meant, and I said I didn't know, which was true, but I also said maybe it was just a remote location issue, which I no longer believed, because remote locations don't suppress emergency cellular frequencies. That's not how geography works. That's how intentional interference works. But I didn't want Mara to panic, so I kept that part to myself. By day 23, the fog arrived. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like the predictable element in every story like this, but I need you to understand this wasn't weather. It didn't behave the way fog behaves. It didn't roll in gradually from the waterline and thicken. It was just suddenly there, like the ship had crossed some invisible threshold into a different atmospheric environment. 1 minute we were under open sky, and the next we were inside something dense enough that you couldn't see the bow from the stern. You couldn't see the water below the railing. You could see perhaps 15 feet in any direction. A gray that was almost textured, almost solid feeling when you moved through it. The temperature dropped fast with it, not cold exactly, but cool in a way that felt like pressure more than temperature, like the air had more weight to it. An announcement came over the ship's PA shortly after, a crew member's voice recommending that passengers remain indoors until further notice, citing reduced visibility, which was reasonable on its face. Every other passenger went inside. Me and Mara were standing on the stern deck when the announcement came. We watched every other person on deck turn and file inside without discussion, without the mild reluctance you'd expect from people being asked to go in when they just come out. They just went, and within 2 minutes, we were the only ones left out there. Mara said she wanted to stay a few more minutes, that it was strange out there, strange like interesting rather than strange like bad, and I understood what she meant because there was something hypnotic about being inside that fog. The way the engine noise came back muffled and softened from the gray around you. The way the water sounds disappeared even though the ocean was right there below the railing. We stood there for maybe 10 minutes. That's when we heard it the first time. It was Mara's name, spoken at a volume just loud enough to be words rather than ambient noise, coming from somewhere off the port side. Somewhere in the fog beyond the railing, not close but not distant either. Exactly as far as the fog's visibility limit, so right at the edge of what you could see, which was nothing. Mara went quiet. Then it came again, her name, then a pause, then my name, both of them spoken the same way in a tone that was almost conversational. I told Mara to go inside, and she moved toward the door without arguing, which told me she was more frightened than she'd let on. Because Mara argues with me when I give her instructions unless she's already frightened enough to agree. So she went inside. I stood there for another few seconds, looking into the fog in the direction the sound had come from. Nothing moved out there. Nothing that I could see. So I went inside too. Neither of us talked about it directly. We talked around it. Mara said something about sound behavior in fog, about how voices can travel from other parts of the ship and become directional in strange ways, which was technically possible. I agreed with her more than I believed her. We both understood that we were managing each other and ourselves. We ate dinner quietly that night and went to bed early, the fog sitting against the porthole window like a wall, no light coming through it from outside, just gray pressing the glass. On day 25, I woke before Mara and went to the stern deck alone. The fog was thinner, not gone but thin enough that you could see maybe 100 feet out. And in that 100 feet, at the very edge of visibility, there was the island. Or rather the impression of something large, a dark mass, irregular at the top suggesting height, buildings or trees or both. Visible enough to know it was there without being visible enough to see what it was. A silhouette inside fog, the whole thing backlit by a gray light that seemed to come from everywhere at once, rather than from any sun. It grew slowly as we approached, the fog thinning as it revealed itself. And what it revealed was what Mara had described from the brochure, a city essentially, structures rising in tiers from the waterfront, buildings of different heights behind it. Something that resembled a cathedral or large civic building near the center, with a dome that caught the gray light differently than the structures around it. A road visible between buildings, and something what might have been a clock tower near the back of the settlement. From that distance it looked like a working city, not a resort or boutique island destination, but a city that had been built over a long period by people who intended to stay. The harbor we pulled into was stone, old carved stone. The dock pilings dark with age and growth, the metal rings set into them so oxidized they were nearly mineral. The bollards the crew tied us to had been repaired and re-repaired so many times you could see at least 3 generations of metalwork on them. Old over older over oldest. The waterfront buildings were 3 and 4 stories, stone construction, the kind of dense, thick-walled architecture you see in southern European coastal towns that have been inhabited for centuries. But every window was dark, shuttered or open-framed with nothing inside. The cobblestone street was swept clean, not abandoned dirty, but clean the way a room gets when no one lives in it, maintained in its emptiness. The other passengers disembarked first. We watched from the deck as they went down the gangway in their slow, careful procession, every one of them, even the ones with walkers, even the wheelchair woman who descended on a platform lift at the gangway's side. They moved with more purpose than they'd shown at any point on the ship, like something had recalibrated in them. And as each one stepped onto the dock, they oriented toward the city interior, toward the street between the buildings. They walked without looking around, without pausing to take in the place. Aldrich was near the back of the group. He looked up at us on the deck as he passed. His expression the same almost pity one from the dining room. He held it for a moment before following the others into the street. Mara wanted to go ashore. I wanted to stay on the ship and wait for everyone to come back and ask very direct questions. But the ship's first officer came to us before we could decide. A thin Greek man who spoke perfect English. Told us the ship would be docked for between 6 and 10 hours, and that passengers were welcome ashore. Then mentioned that Halos Island had been a thriving settlement once, a private colony established in the late 1800s. Now preserved as a heritage site. I asked him where the inhabitants were, and he said the island had been uninhabited since the early 1960s. Mara asked why everyone had left, and he paused the same way Berto had on the Suez Canal, that half-second recalibration, then said that the colony had simply run its course. We went ashore. The city was wrong in a way that's hard to explain without sounding like I'm making things up for effect. Because the wrongness wasn't dramatic, it was the wrongness of proportions that are slightly off. Rooms visible through open doorways that were a little too wide for their height. Streets that curved in directions that didn't match the layout you could see from above. A square in the center of the settlement with a fountain at its middle. The basin dry but recently cleaned. There were signs on some of the buildings, plaques and painted lettering. Most of it in a script that wasn't Greek and wasn't Arabic. And wasn't any alphabet I recognized. Angular and dense. The same script repeated across multiple buildings in whatever language this colony had used for its official signage. We followed the street deeper in, past what had been shops, past what might have been a school based on the smaller-scaled desks visible inside through one open door, past a building with no windows at all. A sealed stone cube with a single iron door, not locked because I tried the handle, just too heavy to move. I put both hands on it and couldn't shift it, and from somewhere behind it, from the other side of that iron door, there was a sound. A sustained low tone like a note being held by a room-sized instrument, felt more in the chest than heard with the ears. Mara heard it too. She took hold of my arm. We found the other passengers in a building at the back of the settlement. The dome building, the cathedral-like structure visible from the ship, its interior open and high-ceilinged. The floor was a single enormous piece of smooth dark stone, the walls lined with niches, each niche holding a lamp that burned with a low yellow flame, which meant someone had lit them. The passengers were arranged in a rough circle near the center of the floor. There was a figure among them that I hadn't seen on the ship, a tall man, tall enough to be wrong about it, thin enough to be wrong about it, dressed in clothing that was dark and formal, but from no period or style I could place. He was standing in the middle of the circle with his back to us, speaking to the group in a low voice we couldn't quite hear from the doorway. I noticed that the circle was not quite a circle. There was a gap in it, a space between two passengers shaped by the fact that everyone on both sides of the gap was oriented carefully away from it, like a space that had been left empty on purpose. The tall man stopped speaking. He turned towards us. His face had too much in it. That's the only way I can say it. Too many features arranged into an expression that was recognizable as a face in the same way that a photograph of a face is recognizable. Close enough to be understood, but with the fundamental wrongness of a copy. His eyes found us in the doorway immediately, as if he'd known we were there before turning, as if he'd been waiting for this specific moment to make the introduction. Nobody in the circle looked at us. The tall man said our names, both of them in the same conversational tone from the fog. Mara grabbed my hand and we ran, which was the right decision, back through the dome building's entrance and into the street, back to the waterfront. And the ship was still there, the gangway still down, Berto on the dock near its base doing something with a rope. He looked up when he saw us coming. He stepped aside and led us up the gangway without a word. We locked ourselves in the stateroom. I don't know how long we stayed there before the ship started moving, before I felt the change in the hull vibration that meant we'd cast off, before the porthole showed me the dock receding and the fog coming back around us as we left the harbor. The island swallowed by gray until there was nothing but ocean. The other passengers returned. I know that because I heard movement in the corridor later that night, the close and lock of stateroom doors, the ship resuming its ambient sounds. We didn't leave the room for 2 days. When we finally emerged, on what the ship's daily newsletter told us was day 27, the other passengers looked different. The woman with the discolored skin, her neck was clear, the pale patch gone as thoroughly as if it had never been there, her skin even and unmarked. The man with the machine clipped to his belt was not wearing it. Aldrich, at his usual breakfast table, sat without the slight tremor in his hands I'd been watching for 3 weeks, his hands folded on the table, perfectly at rest. They looked younger. Not entirely young or transformed, but a graduated step back from where they'd been, everything slightly more present. None of them looked at us differently than before. None of them said anything about the island when I tried to bring it up in conversation, steered anywhere near the subject. The conversation simply redirected, like a stream moving around a stone. We flew out of Perth 12 days later, connected through Dubai, landed in Portland in the early morning, drove home from the airport in the dark. 3 weeks after we got home, Mara was at the bathroom mirror and she called me in, pointed to her neck, to a pale patch spreading from her jawline, roughly the same shape and position as the one I'd seen on the woman from dinner. That same morning I realized I couldn't remember my doctor's name. Not just the phone number, but his name. A name I'd been using for 11 years. Gone from me like a word in a language you've forgotten you ever knew. I've lost other things since then. Small things, a name here, a face there, memories with no timestamp on them, like pages being quietly removed from a book in a room I can't get to. The tone from behind the iron door, the low sustained tone. I can hear it now, not all the time, but often enough. When the house is quiet and Mara is asleep, coming from no direction at all, just underneath everything, like it was always there, and I simply needed to be close enough to that island to learn how to receive it. We were the only 2 people on the Athena Dawn who weren't supposed to be there. The only ones who didn't know the price of passage before they boarded. The only ones who ran before the circle closed. We ran before the transaction was completed. I keep telling myself that matters. I'm less sure of it every morning.